Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host, Lisa Oligas. Cancer is a health diagnosis that for many becomes a life-changing journey. That was true for Olive Sullivan, who turned her experience into a piece of performance art called The Pocket Guide to Desert Survival. We'll be talking to those involved in the show that is part poetry, part music, and dance. Joining us first is the writer herself, Olive Sullivan, raised in Pittsburgh, Kansas. She's been owner of Sullivan Book Arts, has taught college writing classes, was a newspaper reporter, film and playwright, and now is building a career as a full-time freelance writer with a poetry collection called Wandering Bone and a book in 2022 called Skiving Down the Bones, and now performance art. Olive, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So the play, poetry, performance art was all inspired by your own health journey.
Yes.
Tell us about your experience and why you decided to, hey, I'm gonna write about this.
My cancer diagnosis was a complete surprise. I don't have a history of cancer in my family, and the particular disease I have, which is called acute myeloid leukemia, is not a lifestyle cancer. They don't really know what causes it. In my case, I was really tired. So I went to the doctor, thought she would give me some iron pills, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
And instead she said, well, there's something concerning, sent me to a cancer specialist in Pittsburgh who sent me to KU Med. When I was talking to the people at KU Med, I said, you know, what should I bring? And they said, well, bring enough clothing for 30 days. You'll be here for 30 days.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody's in the hospital for 30 days. And in fact, I was there for 5 months.
Oh my gosh.
And I was in a locked isolation ward that whole time with my constant IV pole companion.
Which becomes a character.
Yes.
And I was going to ask, why the IV pole? But you were tethered, I guess, for so long.
Yes, tethered to it 24 hours a day, forever. And the particular one I had was a little bit wonky, and so it was constantly twirling everywhere. And so that's where she ended up getting her name Lulu, because she was such a dancer. She was always just like wrapping her tubes around me and dancing, and it became quite a daily routine for us to be untangled. So, and it was actually my brother's suggestion that she become an actual character in the play. I just had, originally in my first draft, I had Thea, the main character, talking about her. And my brother Mark Sullivan said, well, why don't you make her a character and have her actually be on stage? And I was like, that is a great idea.
Yeah, well, you even said you were kind of doing this dance with her.
Yeah.
So is that what kind of inspired you to say, this should be dancing?
No, I had the idea of writing a ballet with Kay long before I had the experience of
And you're
what
talking
to write
Kay
about.
Lewis,
Yes,
Midwest
Kay
Regional
Lewis.
Ballet.
I'd seen several of her performances by that point. The first one I saw was in 2015 when I was working on my MFA degree and Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And I had been trying to come up with a project for my third semester, and I was just so floored by her performance. It's not your traditional ballet. It's
Right.
somewhere between ballet and modern dance, and just it's just astonishing. Anyway, she had some spoken word dances, and I thought, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And so I had written a previous play that was problematic, and she wasn't interested in that one, and this one got her attention, so
Yeah.
she was willing to move forward.
So obviously it's a collaboration, but tell us about its Pocket Guide to Desert Survival. Why the desert? Why did you bring that into what about your health journey tied into it, the idea of a desert?
Well, the desert is a place where everything is laid bare. So you're stripped down to your essentials. Everything is about survival. I think there's a line in there that says everything in the desert wants to eat you. And it's true. And so I lived in New Mexico for a while, in the Chihuahuan Desert, which stretches on down into Mexico. And I always feel when I go to New Mexico, just like I'm being opened up to things that I don't know that I know, if that makes any sense. That might be a poet thing. But, and I've read a lot about that the desert is a place where, you know, the hermits used to go to the desert to experience spiritual awakening. The Israelis wandered in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights or 40 years or whatever it was. I'm not up on that. But it's just a place where you get down to your essentials. And being in the hospital for all that time, mostly by myself, was a lot like that. There's nothing to do.
Isolated.
You can only read so many books. I think I was reading a book a day.
Wow.
And I was sleeping a lot. And you start thinking. But the interesting thing about illness, and I learned this from another friend of mine who had been through cancer and is a writer, you can't write about trauma while you're in the middle of it. I suppose you can, but it's harder. And so you kind of have to give yourself time to process it. So that's why now this play is coming forth. My diagnosis was in 2017. I spent the 5 months in the hospital. By the time I came out of the hospital, I had kidney failure and was on the kidney transplant list, and eventually got the kidney transplant. My husband died of COVID. There was a pandemic. I mean, all this stuff happened.
Right.
And I was sleeping a lot, basically. So I feel like I slept for 6 years.
Wow.
And then I woke up one day and I said, okay, it's time to get back to it. And this was one of the things that happened, was that I wrote this.
When you said you slept a lot in the hospital, did it kind of give you visions? I mean, did you kind
Yes.
of imagine what this experience was like? And do you think you kind of created some characters in that time at all?
I don't really feel like I created any of it during that time, but I did spend a lot of time having visions and experiences. The part in there about the music of the universe, the deep music of the universe, that did come from the hospital experience. And I was hearing this deep music sort of like almost subliminally, and I kept trying to figure out where it came from. I thought maybe it was the TV in the next room or something, but it wasn't, and I still don't know what it was.
Wow.
And I kept trying to track down the source to it, so I decided that it was just, that's what it was. And whether that's metaphorical or whether it actually is, or whether I'm completely crazy, is up to the audience to decide.
So give us a summary, if you can, of just if someone was going to come see it, tell us what the show's about or the story in general from someone, if they get a little bit of a plot.
Well,
Or is it more of just an experience?
Is there a plot? Yes, it's more of an experience. Basically, Thea wakes up in the desert. So she's sort of brought to the desert in a sandstorm, which provides an opportunity for dance. And it was only after we had started rehearsing that I started realizing that there's some elements of the Wizard of Oz in there. So we have a sandstorm instead of tornado. She's taken a wonderful different land, etc. But the first character she encounters is Coyote. And Coyote is a North American trickster god. According to Native American culture, Coyote created North America and brought people to it. But he's tricky, and he is, his interests are not always the interests of the person that he's dealing with. He also
changes disguises or costumes in a sense.
And he also brought death to the world. So the first person she meets is Coyote. She mistakes him for her oncologist that's giving her the diagnosis. They're talking about death. And then he sort of sends her on a journey towards a distant mesa. And along the way, she meets other creatures and characters and has other experiences. But it's mostly her internal journey where she's trying to come to terms with this diagnosis and with the potential that she may die.
Yeah.
And what that means.
And Lulu, is the IV pole as a character. I mean, is that something you think other cancer patients can relate to? Is it kind of was there a love-hate relationship with your IV pole?
I didn't realize the love part until long afterwards, when I started thinking, well, I should be grateful because basically she saved my life. And I needed to be saved. At the time, I just mostly hated it because it was, you've got a needle in your arm or your wrist or wherever, and so it limits your maneuverability. So in addition to feeling horrible and being exhausted, you have this, and being locked in a room, you have this mobility issue. So they encouraged us to walk sort of around the ward for exercise, but everywhere you went, you had to drag this stupid IV pole with you. And if you had to get up in the night and go to the bathroom, you had to drag the IV pole in there and drag it back and hook it up. And it's always setting off alarms and waking you up.
What was it like conveying your message to the folks with the music and the choreographer in creating this process as we wrap up here, because we're going to talk to them next?
Yes.
What was that process like for you?
I love to collaborate. I think I've been collaborative since probably my earliest memories. My family is very eccentric, we'll say, and we always had opportunities to create things together. That's kind of what we did. My once told my mom it was like living in a perpetual kindergarten. And so the opportunity to collaborate was from the beginning one of my goals. I'm in the band Amanita, and which provided the music. And I originally had hoped that they would be on stage for part of it to perform the music live. There's 8 of us, and everybody is very, very busy.
Hard to wrangle all those schedules, yes.
And so that turned out not to be an option. So what we did was our sound engineer, Steve Possery, worked with me to sort of edit down some of the music that we've already recorded and we have on our 2 CDs. And we call ourselves Death Chill, which is kind of a joke, but we're sort of they use the word tribal, which is another one of those words that's becoming sort of un-PC, but it's drum circle based, but we also have guitar, we have a Celtic harp, we have a trumpet player. I mean, we've got people who are just multiple talented.
And then we have all the dancers from Midwest Regional Ballet. And then, so tell us what you hope folks will take away as we wrap up our interview before we go to the interview with the choreographer.
Well, what I'm hoping is people will come away feeling differently about their own trauma, because everybody's got something. Everybody's going through something. It may not be as dramatic or closely packed together as mine was, but as I talk to people, I realize, everybody that you meet is probably struggling with something that you're not even aware of, and maybe they're not completely aware of. And what I want to do is talk about it, because people so often suppress this and don't talk about it. And one of my missions as a communicator is to talk about things that are unspeakable.
Right.
And death is one of those.
All right. Well, you can see it at the end of July, and thank you, Olive. When we come back, we'll talk to the choreographer director, bringing the Pocket Guide to Desert Survival to the stage. Here's information about the production as we go to break. We'll be back.
Flashback to the mother, mycelium decompose take it all.
Welcome back to Newsmakers as we explore the original production of The Pocket Guide to Desert Survival, written by local author Olive Sullivan. It is being directed and choreographed by Kay Lewis of Midwest Regional Ballet, who joins us now. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is exciting. I mean, an original production. What made you want to do this?
Well, Olive came to me after one of my shows and was discussing with me about her play she wrote. And she said, I love your creative nature. She goes, I think that you'd be the perfect director to bring this to life the way I visualize it, but she said, I also want to use your vision of it too, as well. And I also think she knew that my father passed of cancer almost 9 years ago. And he had multiple myeloma. My dance teacher died of cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, she had brain cancer.
So you feel connected to the idea of cancer?
Yes, she died a year before my dad. And then I've had my aunt, my sister-in-law both have has had mastectomies, and my uncle died of liver cancer. So I've had a lot of
cancer
experience with that. So, and reading her story, I was very touched by the originality of how she put it into the scope of the play. But I also love the music that was with it. It's very Native American sounding, which I used to dance in powwows as a young girl. I'm part Cherokee, German, and Dutch, so there's a lot of mixture going on there.
Yeah.
So that really touched me as a choreographer. And having Condor and Ariel, I was like, yeah, got this. That's cool.
She mentioned that you have done shows where you have put dance to poetry.
Yes.
And that's part of what it is. It's kind of written in a prose poetry style.
Yes.
So is that a challenge as a choreographer, or would you have spoken word and dance?
It can be. There was a couple of songs it just didn't fit, so I asked her permission not to have, and it gave Thea a moment to rest because she's on there all the time. But some of the poems did work well for movement. So some of them are very long, so they're almost a whole page of poetry. So I enjoy the challenge of making that work. And with modern contemporary choreography, you can make it set to anything. You just have to have the physical edge to make it work.
Yeah. Every show has a director. Do you feel a certain responsibility or a weight, so to speak, when you're taking on someone's personal story? I mean, is it a little bit different than, oh yeah, this show's been on Broadway or it's fiction?
Yeah.
this is her baby.
Yes, and that kind of scared me at first. I was like, okay, well, I'll read through it and I'll get back to you. Like, I wanted to really make sure that I felt comfortable telling her story. But then having her have that much, what's the word I'm going for? That she trusted me with it. Like, I think that helped a little too.
She was invested in you.
Yeah, she was invested in me doing it. And once I read it, I was like, okay, yeah, I have some of my own ideas to throw in here. And so far, she's like my vision of her vision, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it has been a true collaboration.
Yes.
And so talk to us about some of these characters and do they fit with dance? I mean, I thought it was really ingenious and she said somebody suggested that she turn her IV pole into a character that dances.
Yes.
Which is neat.
Yeah, it is funny because she's dressed in all silver to look like an IV pole, and she'll have tubes and stuff on her. But it was fun. Like, the girl playing it is a very quiet, laid-back girl, and she has to be very funny as Lulu. So it's been fun pulling that out of her. And the girl playing Thea, they're sisters, so they already have that connection mentally. And so it's fun watching them play back and forth with each other. And this is Araya, the girl playing Olive's life, her first time ever being on stage as an actress. I mean, she's an amazing dancer and she's an amazing physical actress, and she's done such a great job. And she has a lot of lines to memorize. So, yeah.
Wow. So, and let's talk about, I mean, you do a lot of aerials in your performances with Midwest Regional Ballet. So the character of Condor represents death. I could certainly envision circling like a vulture.
Yes.
Is that kind of a visual that was kind of fun to do, to put folks in air?
Yeah, it is. And he's in a white fabric, which really contrasts his black costume, and he has like a feather mohawk headpiece. So he's not just circling all the time. Sometimes he's flying back and forth over her. But there are moments where she's speaking to him and she's like right there talking up to him while he's hanging upside down and giving her these little cocky attitude, So it's been fun to play with all these characters and kind of help bring them to life.
So you've done dance poetry before. How do audiences respond? I mean, this won't be your typical musical.
No, I think personally, the audience, anytime you can portray things that are painful to speak of it through dance and artistry, I think that actually softens the blow of how harsh life can be. Like when I did the Black and White series, it was about suicide, rape, and things that people don't want to speak of. But the people who came and saw it really appreciated that it was done in such an art form that it wasn't like so in your face, and it had like a soft hit, I guess, so to speak.
Tell us a little bit about the process, especially when you're developing dance and movement and for a very uniquely new character, not something, we know who that character is. We've seen this kind of character before. This is somebody's original life work. So what's the process you go through and like, okay, this is how we can show that person?
I had a lot of conversations with Olive about her actual feeling during that moment. And that helps a lot. Like actually getting feedback from her, what she felt, how destroyed she was or distraught, or how she knew she was going to fight her way through it. So that helped develop Thea, which is her, and listening to her, how she intertwined with her actual IV pole. It's actually she gave it a name, so Lulu's a funny name, so.
It is.
Yeah.
Were there any specific movements that you could go, oh, this makes sense to be like an IV pole when you're bringing something relatively inanimate to life?
Yeah. So the tango between Thea and Lulu was the fun part.
Yeah.
Because that actually showed that they were attached, but how much she hated being attached to that pole for, I think, 5 months constantly, being filled with chemo. So, the tango's all about that fight sequence anyway. So it was fun putting that. That was probably my favorite so far, putting it together. Because we made it a little comical, but we also made it very tango. Like there's that mental war with I know you're saving me life, but I don't want to be attached to you.
Love-hate relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've been part of stage readings before, and you can change things on a day-to-day basis. Does a show like this, mean, oh, hey, let's adjust that, let's change that in rehearsals? I mean, was Olive present during some of the rehearsals, or were there things that you could go, this isn't working the way we wanted?
Yes, we've had that. There were some things that didn't spill over the way, like didn't reach the way I felt like it could have.
Yeah.
But she liked the way that I changed it. And yeah, she's been at rehearsals. I always ask her permission before I change anything. Like, so how do you feel about this? I see this. What are your thoughts? And she's like, oh yeah, I see where you're coming from. I like that better.
Yeah.
And she's not a dancer or an actress, so I think she entrusted that I had a different vision, but it still ended up the same that her vision did, just in a different route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be part of such a world premiere, so to speak, or an original production?
I'm so honored. Like, the way she approached me, it just felt like it was scary, but then I was like so honored. Like, I actually went home and cried about it because I was like, wow, somebody's trusted me with this kind of information and to put on stage and make her life come to life and all the things that she had been through. But I also think when you've been at situations where you've also been close to death, which I have twice, so you comprehend that fear too. So
You could certainly relate.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I believe audiences will too.
I think they're going to really relate to it. Even, I don't think anybody doesn't know someone who's either dealt with cancer or had a cancer scare, or, scares of any kind. Like, I almost died from bacterial pneumonia a few years ago. So, I think we've all been close to death at some point in our
know
life,
someone
or
has.
dealt with somebody
Yeah.
that has that. You're going to appreciate the kind of snarky, funny parts, but you're also going to really appreciate what she went through and how she lived through it.
All right. Kay Lewis, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. Appreciate you. Well, as we go to break, details of how you can get tickets to the production. When we come back, we'll talk with one of the performers who also created some original music for the Pocket Guide to Desert Survival.
She calls to me. I feel this vessel weakening.
Welcome back. The Pocket Guide to Desert Survival is a kind of performance art that includes dance, music, and poetry or verse, and actors. One of those is Dr. Joey Pogue, who previously served as the Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of Communication at Pittsburgh State University. He's retired now, but he's taught media theory, interpersonal communication, and gender studies, and he occasionally directed theater productions. He joins us now to discuss the show. You are a character in this show and part of the creative team, so you provided some music along with Olive Sullivan's band, Amanita.
Right.
So how do your songs complement the show?
Well, Olive went through a very trying period of time where she had cancer and a kidney transplant and a kidney replacement, and so she was facing a lot of ambiguity in her existence. Am I going to live or am I going to die?
Right.
And so she asked me to write a couple of songs that captures that position that we all have to face eventually.
Yeah. So how do you write? Do you think of the story first then, or do you get influenced to have some music and when you compose?
In this case, it was easier for me to write because she gave me direction, and she gave me. The first song is that I do two songs, and then I do some harmonica music in between. But she wanted me to be a kind of a smart aleck. I'm the coyote, which is in Indian lore. I'm like this trickster person, and she wanted me kind of a smart aleck and actually tease her as she goes through this very tragic situation. Am I going to live or am I going to die? And so the first song is a little bit of a trickster, it's got some life to it. The second song is a little bit more serious because halfway through the play, and she's still facing, am I going to live? Am I going to die? So, I had the direction was given to me. And I just kind of went with it. And every once in a while, I'd call her up and say, "I've got this line," and she said, "I like that." And have you thought about putting this in? And
So a true collaboration.
yeah, it was definitely she gave me the base to go from. Yeah.
You want to give us a little sample?
Sure.
Okay.
Like I said, the first song is a kind of a trickster. I'm kind of being a smart aleck. I am coyote, born to break the rules. I rewrite the stories and turn people into fools. I am the coyote, king of the trickster game. If your life's uncertain, I'm the one to blame, 'cause I am the coyote. I'm the coyote.
Awesome.
So that's the coyote
Yeah.
teasing her as she's
Right.
grappling with, am I going to live or am I going to
How does
die?
it feel to be part of a very original piece? You know, something that's, I mean, it's its world premiere essentially.
Well, when I was at Pitt State, I'm retired now actually, but when I was at Pitt State, I did some theater and I've done theater before. I've written songs before, but in this case, you know, it's a collaboration of dance, music, poetry, lines. It's a configuration, and it's really a warm experience. It's kind of profound. When I'm at rehearsal and I see the dancers, it's like I have to remember I'm in this show because I'm watching them. They're very impressive.
Yeah. So what do you hope the audience takes away from a show like this?
Awareness of the fact that we're all going to someday face what Olive was facing, and some of us, you know, live and some of us don't. And so life is precious. It makes us aware, just how aware of how fragile we are, and puts us in tune with feelings. And I had my own bout with a kidney disease at one time in my life, and I remember I was so aware of everything.
Really?
Just mundane stuff, you know, because I didn't know whether I was going to be able to be a part of it anymore. And so she goes through that. In the show, there's several times where she wants to live, and we all want to live. And so, yeah, it puts us in touch with that.
Was it easy to wrap yourself around this subject then, since you had your own personal experience?
Yeah, she and I talked about that some, because I had a cancer scare. Mine turned out to be non-malignant, and I have one kidney, and they took one kidney out because they didn't know whether it was cancer or not. It turned out to be not cancer, but I didn't know for a while, for about 3 weeks before. And so I'm in tune with what she went through, just not knowing what's going to happen. We all like to know what the outcome of something is, but
Sure.
we don't. Sometimes we don't get that certainty.
Yeah. Well, quite the unique experience. Well, thank you, Dr. Pogue, for sharing it and joining the discussion. We appreciate
Well, thank
being
you,
here.
and I hope everybody comes out to see the show. It's a warm experience, and I think they'll enjoy it.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Pogue.
for having me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pogue, and thank you for watching. You can catch The Pocket Guide to Desert Survival, a play about life, death, and everything in between, July 28th and 29th at 7 p.m. and July 30th at 2 p.m. at Pittsburgh Memorial Auditorium. Tickets are available online at memorialauditorium.org. That wraps up this edition of Newsmakers. I'm Lisa Allegas.